Year 2! Welcome to the second part of Horrid Henry's Stinkbomb. We're going to read part 2, which is called Horrid Henry's Stinkbomb. So, it starts in a really horrible way. It starts with Sour Susan saying, "I hate you, Margaret!" She stumbled out of the secret club tent. "I hate you too!" shrieked Moody Margaret. Sour Susan stuck out her tongue. Moody Margaret stuck out hers back. "I quit!" yelled Susan. "You can't quit! You're fired!" yelled Margaret. "You can't fire me! I quit!" said Susan. "I fired you first!" said Margaret, "and I'm changing the password." "Go ahead, see if I care. I don't want to be in the secret club anymore," said Susan sourly. "Good, because we don't want you." Moody Margaret flounced back inside the secret club tent. Sour Susan walked off. Free at last! Susan was sick and tired of her ex-best friend Bossy Boots Margaret blaming her for the disastrous raid on the Purple Hand Fort when it's all Margaret's fault was bad enough. But then to ask stupid Linda to join the secret club without even telling her? Susan hated Linda even more than she hated Margaret. Linda hadn't invited Susan to her sleepover party, and she was a copycat. But Margaret didn't care. Today she'd made Linda chief spy. Well, Susan had had enough. Margaret had been mean to her once too often. It's not very nice to fall out with friends, is it? And it's really not nice to say that you hate someone. Hate is such a strong word. Luckily, we know this is a book and not real life. Susan heard gales of laughter from inside the club tent. So they were laughing, were they? Laughing at her, no doubt. Well, she'd show them. She knew all about Margaret's top secret plans, and she knew someone who would be very interested in that information. Doesn't sound good to me. "Halt! Password!" "Smelly toads," said Perfect Peter. He waited outside Henry's Purple Hand Fort. "Wrong," said Horrid Henry. "What's the new one then?" said Perfect Peter. "I'm not telling you," said Henry. "You're fired, remember?" Perfect Peter did remember. He'd hoped Henry had forgotten. "Can't I join again, Henry?" asked Peter. "No way," said Horrid Henry. "Please?" said Perfect Peter. "No," said Horrid Henry. "Ralph's taken over your duties." Rude Ralph poked his head through the branches of Henry's lair. "No babies allowed," said Rude Ralph. "We don't want you here, Peter," said Horrid Henry. "Get lost." Perfect Peter burst into tears, understandably. "Cry baby," jeered Horrid Henry and Rude Ralph. That did it. "Mum!" wailed Perfect Peter. He ran towards the house. "Henry won't let me play, and he called me a cry baby." "Stop being horrid, Henry," shouted Mum. Peter waited. Mum didn't say anything else. Perfect Peter started to wail louder. "Mum! Henry's being mean to me." "Leave Peter alone, Henry," shouted Mum. She came out of the house. Her hands were covered in dough. "Henry, if you don't stop—" Mum looked around. "Where's Henry?" "In his fort," sniffled Peter. "I thought you said he was being mean to you," said Mum. "He was," wailed Peter. "Oh, just keep away from him," said Mum. She went back into the house. Perfect Peter was outraged. Was that it? Why hadn't she punished Henry? Henry had been so horrid he deserved to go to prison for a year, 2 years, and just get a crust of bread each week. And Brussels sprouts. Ha! That would serve Henry right. But until Henry went back to prison, how could Peter pay him back? And then Peter knew exactly what he could do. He checked carefully to see that no one was watching. Then he started sneaking over the garden wall and headed for the secret club tent. "He isn't," said Margaret. "She wouldn't," said Henry. "He's planning to swap our lemonade for a dungeon drink," said Margaret. "Yes," said Peter. She's planning Stinkbomb the Purple Hand Fort," said Henry. "Yes," said Susan. "How dare she?" said Henry. "How dare he?" said Margaret. "I'll easily put a stop to that. Linda," she barked, "hide the lemonade." Linda yawned. "Hide it yourself," she said. "I'm tired." Margaret glared at her and then hid the jug under a box. "Ha ha! Won't Henry be shocked when he sneaks over and there are no drinks to spike?" gloated Margaret. "Peter, you are a hero. I award you the triple star, the highest honour of the secret club." Oh, thanks, said Peter. It was so nice being appreciated for a change. So from now on, said Moody Margaret, you're working for me. Okay, said the traitor Peter. Horrid Henry rubbed his hands. This was fantastic. At last he had a spy in the enemy's camp. He'd easily defend himself against that stupid Stinkbomb. Margaret would only let it off when he was in the fort. His sentry would be on the lookout, armed with a goo shooter. When Margaret tried to sneak in with her Stinkbomb, kapow! Hang on a sec, said Horrid Henry. Why should I trust you? Because Margaret is mean and horrible, and I don't like her, said Susan. So from now on, said Horrid Henry, you're working for me. Susan wasn't sure that she liked the sound of that. Then she remembered Margaret's mean cackle. Okay, said the traitor. Peter sneaked back into his garden and collided with someone. Ouch, said Peter. Watch where you're going, snapped Susan. They glared at each other suspiciously. That was hard to say, suspiciously. What were you doing at Margaret? Said Susan. Nothing, said Peter. What were you doing at my house? Nothing, said Susan. Peter walked towards Henry's fort, whistling. Susan walked towards Margaret's tent, whistling. Well, if Susan was spying on Henry for Margaret, Peter certainly wasn't going to warn him. Serves Henry right. Well, if Peter was spying on Margaret for Henry, Susan wasn't going to warn her. Serves Margaret right. Dungeon drinks, eh? Margaret liked the idea of that much better than the Stinkbomb. I've changed my mind about the Stinkbomb, said Margaret. I'm going to swap his drinks for a dungeon drink instead. Good idea, said Lazy Linda. Less work. Stinkbomb, eh? Henry liked that much better than his dungeon drink plot. Why hadn't he thought of that? I've changed my mind about the dungeon drink, said Henry. I'm going to Stinkbomb her instead. Yeah, said Rude Ralph. When? Now, said Horrid Henry. Come on, let's go to my room. Horrid Henry opened his stinky Stinkbomb kit. Not a normal thing for a child to have. He'd bought it with Grandma. Mum would never have let him buy it, but because Grandma had given him the money, Mum couldn't do anything about it. Ha, ha, ha. Now, which pong would he pick? He looked at the test tubes filled with powder and read the gruesome labels. Bad breath, dog poo, rotten eggs, smelly socks, dead fish, sewer stench. Oh. I'd go for dead fish, said Ralph. That's the worst. Henry considered. How about we mix the dead fish and the rotten eggs? Yeah, said Rude Ralph. Slowly, carefully, Horrid Henry measured out a teaspoon of dead fish powder and a teaspoon of rotten egg powder into the special pouch. Slowly, carefully, Rude Ralph poured out 150 millilitres of secret Stinkbomb liquid into the bottle and capped it tightly. All they had to do was add the powder to the bottle outside the secret club and run. Ready? Said Horrid Henry. Ready, said Rude Ralph. Whatever you do, said Henry, don't spill it. So you've come crawling back, said Moody Margaret. I knew you would. No, said Sour Susan. I just happened to be passing. She looked around the secret club tent. Where's Linda? Margaret scowled. Gone. Gone for today or gone forever, said Susan. Forever, said Margaret savagely. I don't ever want to see that lazy lump again. These children aren't very nice, are they? Margaret and Susan looked at each other. Susan tapped her foot. Margaret hummed. Well, said Margaret. Well, what? Said Susan. Are you rejoining the secret club as a chief spy, or aren't you? I might, said Susan, and I might not. Suit yourself, said Margaret. I'll call Gerinda and ask her to join instead. Okay, said Susan. I'll join. Should she mention her visit to Henry? Better not. After all, what Margaret didn't know wouldn't hurt her. Now, about my Stinkbomb plot, began Margaret. I decided... Something shattered on the ground inside the tent. A ghastly, gruesome, grisly, stinky stench filled the air. Oh! Screamed Margaret, gagging. It's a Stinkbomb! Help! Shrieked Sour Susan. Stinkbomb! Help! Victory! Horrid Henry and Rude Ralph ran back to the Purple Hand Fort and rolled round the floor laughing and shrieking. What a triumph! Margaret and Susan screaming, Margaret's mum screaming, Margaret's dad screaming, and the stink. Wow. Horrid Henry had never smelled anything so awful in his life. This called for a celebration. Horrid Henry offered Ralph a fistful of sweets and poured out 2 glasses of fizzy whiz drinks. Cheers, said Henry. Cheers, said Ralph. And they drank. Oh, choked rude Ralph. Blech, yelped Horrid Henry, gagging and spitting. We've been dungeon drinked. And then Horrid Henry heard a horrible sound. Moody Margaret and Sour Susan were outside the Purple Hand Fort chanting a victory chant. Na, 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 na. And that is the end of part 2. We will read part 3 on Thursday. Have a lovely day.